All right, so the next one here, Lavrov says Ukraine guarantees must include Russia. So, Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov said on Wednesday that any talks about security guarantees for Ukraine must involve Russia, calling the discussions about guarantees without Moscow's participation utopian thinking that leads nowhere. So his comments come as this group of European countries led by the UK and France that calls itself the Coalition of the Willing is insisting on the idea of deploying troops to Ukraine. Trump has provided, at least rhetorical support for the idea, suggesting that the U.S. can provide air support. He's ruled out the idea of sending U.S. troops, but it almost seemed like he put that idea out there. I feel like too many people stress the fact that Trump then said, "Oh, don't worry, I'm not going to send troops." Like he gave an assurance on that, but the fact that he's saying he'll support this European ground presence with air power, I mean, it's just never going to happen. It's, if that's really what they're going to try to do, there's not going to be a deal here. And Lavrov said that, reaffirmed that on Wednesday. Lavrov said, quote, "We cannot agree with the current proposal to resolve issues of collective security without Russia. This cannot work. I am confident that the West, especially the United States, understands perfectly well that discussing security issues without Russia is utopian thinking that leads nowhere," end quote. Lavrov pointed to a draft peace deal from April 2022 that included security guarantees involving the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, which is the U.S., France, the UK, China, and Russia. And as I mentioned, when you see Steve Witkoff saying, "Oh, Putin agreed to Article 5 NATO-like security guarantees," that this is probably what he was talking about. Which this idea kind of confuses me. I don't understand. Like, the idea is Ukraine's a neutral state, then all these other countries will give guarantees for their security. I guess it's just pledges that they won't attack. But then if they do come under attack, then they're going to do something about it. But, I don't really understand it exactly. But anyway, Lavrov says that Ukraine proposed this and that Russia agreed at the time in April 2022. And then, of course, the U.S. and its allies discouraged these negotiations and encouraged Ukraine to fight. And this is where we are today. But Lavrov said, quote, "In other words, Ukraine's proposal clearly stated that these guarantees would be equal and that the security of all interested parties, including Ukraine's neighbors, would be ensured on an equal, indivisible basis. At that time, in April 2022, Russia supported this position," end quote. And another important thing here is, at the time, according to the Ukrainian negotiator, the lead negotiator, he said this about a year after these negotiations, that at the time, Russia's main demand was neutrality. They weren't asking for territory. So Ukraine would have been much better off if they made the deal back then. And I think that's the case now. They're going to be a lot better off if they do make a deal now. It concedes some territory than, if the war just continues indefinitely.